May 1998. The ruins of Hogwarts. The air is heavy with the smell of burning stone and ozone. Through the chaos of battle, one sound cuts through the noise caned, the dry, raspy sound of a massive body sliding over cold tiles. Nagini. For every single one of us watching that moment, she was the embodiment of absolute evil. A ruthless killing machine. Voldemort's favorite toy. The very beast that sank its fangs into Severus Snape's neck while Harry Potter watched in horror from the shadows. We hated her. We feared her. And when Neville Longbottom raised the sword of Gryffindor, slicing her head from her body, audiences around the world exhaled in relief. The evil was defeated. The Horcrux was destroyed. But what if I told you that our relief was a mistake? What if I told you that in that moment, what fell to the stone floor wasn't just the head of a magical beast, but a woman who had been waiting for this death for almost 70 years? A woman locked inside her own skin, trapped in the most terrifying prison imaginable. To understand the true horror of this tragedy, we need to rewind the tape and look at a medical diagnosis that was far worse than any unforgivable curse. Let's get the facts straight. Nagini is not an animagus. Sirius Black or Minerva McGonagall could transform into animals at the snap of a finger. For them, it was a gift, a controlled skill. For Nagini, it was a death sentence. A maledictus. A carrier of a blood curse passed down exclusively through the female line. J.K. Rowling once admitted she sat on this secret for 20 years, and the very name Nagini is a direct reference to the Naga of Indian mythology, half-human, half-snake beings. The nature of the curse is terrifyingly simple. It is a one-way ticket. At first, you transform by choice. Then you start losing control. And in the finale, you remain a beast forever, forgetting you ever knew how to speak, cry, or feel like a human being. Imagine living with a countdown timer inside your head. You know that one day you will fall asleep as a woman and wake up as a monster, and there will be no turning back. This isn't a superpower. It is a slow execution stretched over decades. But while that timer was still ticking down back in 1927, we don't meet a monster. We meet a broken yet kind young woman. Paris, 1927. In Fantastic Beasts, we see a Nagini who is roughly 30 years old, and the sight is heartbreaking. This isn't a villain. This is a shy, quiet girl working in a magical freak show, the Circus Arcanus, where she is paraded around as a curiosity. She is an outcast, just like Credence Barebone, with whom she shares her pain. Pay attention to a detail many miss when Grindelwald, the most charismatic dark wizard of the age, offers her a place in his revolution. She refuses. She had a choice, and she chose the light. She tried to save Credence. She helped Newt Scamander. Compassion lived in her heart, even though the world treated her like an object. It is a cruel irony of fate. The woman who rejected one dark lord in her youth would become the most loyal weapon of another in her old age. But back then, in Paris, she was still clinging to her humanity, desperately trying to stop time. Unfortunately, biology doesn't care about the strength of your spirit. The years passed and the human form began to slip away, leaving her in total, deafening silence. Between 1945 and 1994, there is a black hole in her biography. It was during this period that the curse delivered its final blow. We don't know exactly when it happened, maybe in the 40s, maybe later, but the day came when the transformation simply didn't reverse. Imagine the horror. You try to stand on your feet, but they are gone. You want to scream, to call for help, but only a hiss escapes your throat. Nagini was trapped, permanently. Ordinary snakes of her type live for about 20 years. Nagini lived for over 90. The magic of the curse wouldn't let her age or die naturally, condemning her to an eternal existence in a foreign body. For decades she wandered the forest, likely losing her mind. Human memory was being overwritten by predatory instincts. The cold, the hunger, and the worst part, the silence. No one in the entire world could understand her. She was a sentient being screaming into the void, while her human self slowly dissolved into venom and scales. This continued until, in the deep forests of Albania, she sensed the presence of someone just as broken and lost as she was. And so, in the Albanian wilderness, fate brought them together. Tom Riddle at that point was just a shadow, a bodiless spirit who had lost his physical form after the backfire in Godric's Hollow. And Nagini was a body that had lost its human spirit. They were the perfect puzzle pieces. For Nagini, Voldemort was salvation from the madness of isolation. He was a parcel mouth. After half a century of silence, she finally heard someone who understood her. Someone who could speak to her. Imagine the gratitude and the sickly attachment she must have felt. This wasn't just servitude to a master, it was a symbiosis of two cripples. Her venom nursed his weak, rudimentary body, and his presence gave her a reason to exist. But Voldemort wouldn't be Voldemort if he didn't ruin everything completely. By murdering Bertha Jorkins, he turned Nagini into a Horcrux. He forced a piece of his mangled soul into a creature that was already barely holding onto the remnants of her own identity. That was the end. The woman inside the snake finally gave way to the Dark Lord's magic. It was this bond, born of despair and sealed with dark magic, that led her back to Hogwarts, right under the blade of the sword that was destined to end her suffering. And here we are, back in that courtyard of the ruined castle. May 1998. Neville swings the sword. Silver meets flesh. In that moment, it wasn't just the life of the final Horcrux that was extinguished. It was the end of 70 years of pain, fear, and muteness. Death by the sword of Gryffindor was the liberation Nagini could never find in life. The story of this woman, from a shy circus performer to a symbol of absolute evil, is perhaps one of the most tragic in the entire saga. It reminds us that beneath the skin of every monster there may be a mutilated soul that simply had no one to save it. But Nagini is far from the only victim of circumstance in Rowling's world. If we look closer, we find a whole gallery of broken destinies that force us to rethink everything we knew about heroes and villains. And there are at least 9 other characters whose tragedies rival that of the Cursed Snake.